Let's kick things off today with a bit of a refresher. This is an M car. And this, you guessed it, also a full-fat M car. Okay, now that we have that all cleared up, the tricky part. This, not an M car. So let's put aside the test and answer the obvious question, what the hell is this thing? Because to most people, it looks like an ordinary BMW i7 M60. There, it's not. It's a BMW i7 M70. Yes, there's an M in the name. We can argue later in the episode as to why or why not. It's a full M car. But what really is the difference? You see, there are a couple of things, even though it looks very much the same. More power. So think of this as like an EV hot rod. It is still a dual motor EV. The front motor is the same output, both horsepower and torque. It's the rear motor that changes significantly. It is a different electric motor and a different inverter, which changes the output. The horsepower increases by over 100, and the torque, if we're being very pedantic, it increases by 99 pound-feet. Now that we got the key M70 change out of the way, let's focus on the bits that haven't changed, the biggest one being the battery. It's still 101.7 kilowatt hours. In terms of the US government, they say the range changed a little bit. It's a bit less, 295 miles. Now charging, that also hasn't changed because the architecture is the same. So it's not as fast as the Porsche, the Hyundai, or the Kia. So 10 to 80% on a DC fast charger, which is capped at 195 kilowatts in this vehicle. That would be 34 minutes, 11 kilowatts on level 2. But putting that aside, let's focus on really the big change here, and that is performance figures. You would expect that much extra power and torque, it would change the performance figures, and there it does by a lot. 0 to 60, 3.5 seconds. Look at the size of that thing, 3.5 seconds. VMAX electronic limited to 155 miles an hour. Now before we put that to the test, a favor, you know what I'm gonna ask here. If you see value in these episodes, do all the YouTube things. Subscribe, notifications, like, but most importantly, share these episodes with all your friends on your socials. Why? Because the algorithm, as much as you don't like me saying this, it is a bitch. It will not change until you interact with it. Go ahead, say it. You remember how much that Spectre weighed. But in the surprise of the century, this is lighter. 5,929 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,689 kilograms. Now, two important points of order. That is only 10 pounds heavier than the i7 M60 you and I have already driven, but it's about 500 pounds less than the Spectre, and I will go on record as saying that most of the folks at Rolls-Royce will never admit that probably a lot of the bits in this car are shared with the Spectre. But enough of that. Normal mode. Oh my God. Yeah, that is M velocity. It may not have an M badge on it, but that is definitely M velocity. Around town, this is a hell of a lot of car. I would argue you would have your hands full trying to get this thing around town and not hurting yourself. But you know what? Let's put that aside and let's try something a bit different. There is no one around here. Sport mode. And we're gonna go to, yep. But there is an interrupt screen because what you're doing in sport mode is you're switching off the dynamic stability control. So let's say yes to that. Basically, that is a legal tender agreement that if you kill yourself, it's up to you. So, vaya con Dios. Oh my God. So yeah, you hear the BMW active sounds or iconic sounds more. If I didn't know better, it does the same trick as the Porsche 911 Turbo S. Now, granted, we drove that many years ago, but what that does in launch control mode, the car literally rotates each wheel one revolution. So it goes around once before the car hooks up, and it almost gives a sensation where the car levitates. This, you feel like you're levitating when you're in the sport mode. It is too fast for most people. I would say this, I would go so far as to saying that you probably would want to offer like a BMW performance driving school as standard with something like this. That's the kind of speed this is. Am I complaining? Not at all, but God, this is crazy fast for a 6,000 pound car. want to see a fascinating trick, something you haven't seen in a very long time, look at this and try to find the differences in appearance between this and an i7 M60. Go ahead, I double dog dare you. Okay, the ones with the keen eyes look at the brakes and say, blue brake calipers. Yeah, the brakes are tuned differently, like the suspension. It's the same setup in the suspension, it's just tuned differently. But aside from the brakes, what else looks different between these two cars? Yeah, again, you could look and see the badge here. Now, yeah, it says M, and technically it's not an M car. Why is it not an M car? Well, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, it's 6,000 pounds. It's huge. You can't do the M driving dynamics magic. Here, they're kind of waiting for battery technology to get lighter in order to have the same driving dynamics characteristics to the point where they could bestow an M badge on this car and not be laughed at. That's the reality of it. Now, putting aside which badges belong on what cars, any angle you look at this, it looks exactly the same as the car on which it's based, which brings us to two different theories of design. When different car manufacturers change engine or performance, they go what I call the Pontiac route, where they add all this cladding to make the car look different, to make it look faster. AMG kind of does this today. But then there's the other theory. Never let them see you coming, especially when you're adding a lot more output on a car that is already kind of fast. Now, applying this approach to the inside is a bit of a mixed bag. Here's why. Today in 2024, this looks unusual. You've got this leather here, here, as well as here, and it's something that stands out because it's different. Very few car manufacturers do this thing of like this cloth or linen, whatever it is, with this unusual pattern in the seats that's combined with this very cool graphic on the speaker grills. It stands out. However, fast forward 20, 30, even 50 years where this potentially could be considered a classic car, and in my eyes, this, whether it's this or the 760, it's going to look like a 1976 Lincoln Continental looks today. It's old, it's tired. You can see there's just too much 70s in that car. Put another way, it looks too Huggy Bear. So my question, am I the only one that sees the Huggy Bear of 2024 in this? Comments below. So yes, you and I are at that point where we have to discuss driving dynamics, but this, instead of focusing on the theory of how the planes of motion work or how to position the weight of this car just perfectly, we need to have the discussion about this and the grand scheme of things of large EVs. I told you that the i7 M60 we already drove craps on the doorstep of any EQS sedan. This is to a completely different level. This is now the reference standard of how a large EV with this much weight, this kind of length, should drive. Now, why did I tell you that the BMW i7 M60 craps on the doorstep of the Mercedes? It was simple. They made it a BMW first. It still felt like a BMW 7 Series, and then it was an electric car. So all the goodness about BMW tuning to the suspension, the steering, all of that kind of made the jump to the EV. They made this a car not for everyone. Like, the minute you get behind the wheel, you notice the ride quality is different. You feel the bigger wheels and tires. The steering really doesn't change that much. But this, I don't want to call it offensive, but it will offend some in that it's not a complete luxury car first. It's a BMW sedan first. And that is a damn good thing. But let's put aside my pontificating, because you and I both know the people that will buy this thing will never take it to roads like this and do what I am doing with it. But that's the point. The fact that you can take it from any BMW store and do this straight out of the box with a car this size and weight, that's what it's all about. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant. You know what, let's call this a bargain basement Rolls Royce, because I think that's going to help you get over the hump here. You see, the base price of this, the i7 M70, $168,500. Now you're thinking, wow, isn't that a lot more than the M60? Yes, it is. It is the equivalent of a very well-equipped BMW 3 Series. 50 grand more in base price for this. Then we press on to that color, Brooklyn Gray. It's a lovely color. We saw it on M3s and M4s. Thankfully, we don't have to pay extra for it because we're practically out of money. Now, we already discussed that interior, the two-tone tactile feel. Part of that is full merino leather. It's dark gray. It is an additional $1,000. Then while we're inside, would you like an Alcantara branded headliner? That's kind of like faux suede. That will cost you, in a $170,000 car, $5,450. Then we press on to the premium package. This adds various and sundry bits like the park assist, the 3D surround system, and an illuminated grille. Now, we already discussed, never let them see you coming. Why do that at night for an additional $1,750? Then the executive package, that adds the front massaging seats, the crystal headlights, and the doors that open with a button, which I have to say sound stupid but are very cool when you play around with them. Then the executive rear seat package, that's like the lounger on the right side in the rear, and this has the like super duper TV that comes down so the sunroof really doesn't open. That's an additional $7,250. Now, being you and I have been discussing theories throughout this episode, here's another one for you. If you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You might as well get the better stereo, Barris & Wilkins, $4,800. Then the only thing we pay extra for is the destination and handling von Dingolfing, Deutschland, which is a bargain compared to Korean cars at only $995, which brings us to the total retail price of $194,645. Put another way, that is about half the base price of a Rolls-Royce Spectre. Okay, so a couple of things before you and I part for the day. Number one, need to point out one of the areas where the Mercedes has the advantage. Notice trying to do a U-turn here. There's no one around. I have to do a three-point turn. Yeah, this has four-wheel steering. It's more for high-speed stability. The Mercedes, that with the 10 degrees of rear-wheel steering, could do that U-turn in one fell swoop. So, point Mercedes. Number two, it's getting a little toasty in here, so let's go ahead and put on the cooled seat. And number three, we have the open road. We have this car. How many opportunities do you and I have nowadays in the world of crossovers and electric cars to be foolish morons? So I say we take advantage of that opportunity. Boost mode. It picks up even more. It's just stupid. You notice the front end lift a bit more in this case, so basically it's squatting in the ass end. I mean, allow me to sound like a bit of a moron. This thing kind of bends the space-time continuum. It's ridiculous. It makes very little sense for most people, but for those that need a very large electric car that is crazy quick. So this was an unusual learning experience for you and I today. I rolled into it thinking, they already made a good car, do they need this extra version? And the answer is absolutely yes, and here's why. It's now the reference standard for how an old world car company should be making large, heavy electric vehicles. Now yeah, there's the carve out for the Lucid that does a lot of the same thing here without all of the very heavy air ride that this thing has. Put that one aside. The real thing here, it's a great thing, but it's criminally expensive, which gets us to the wish list. And this isn't just for BMW. This is for BMW, Mercedes, Audi, anybody who wants to make a car like this, that is EV propulsion system put aside, all of the stuff you and I debate about the grid, the infrastructure. I'm talking about just the technology in the car. Until we get to the point where the battery doesn't add a 1,000-pound weight penalty, which this does, this is what other manufacturers should be doing, full stop. It's that good, but 200 grand, that is just a bridge too far. Let's do this kind of driving dynamics in something that's under 75. I know, a huge ask, but this is where you're going to get adoption in these kind of vehicles, not a 200 grand Lucid already kind of proved that point. But I am just one man, and this is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you found value in this episode, I would highly suggest you check out one of our Lucid episodes, most likely the cheapest one that would give you a better idea of something that's not $200,000. You can check out that episode here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.